Stefan Baumann's The Grand View is funded in part by
Plein Air Magazine, for people who love painting outdoors. pleinairmagazine.com.
and by
Masterpiece Canvas, makers of fine art canvases. We supply the canvas, you supply the vision.
and by
paintingfromnature.com, a website for artists seeking inspiration, advice, and knowledge to master painting from nature. paintingfromnature.com.
In 1915, a group of businessmen, railroad executives, and members of Congress set out on a journey into the Southern Sierra. The group, called the Mountain Party, was led by Stephen Mathers, a businessman that had made his fortune in the borax mines of Death Valley. His objective was to develop the infrastructure of the national park system, creating an entity whose focus was to promote and develop America's natural wonders. His work and the work of the Mountain Party changed the face of the national park system, developing a model of management that exists to this day. This is the region that inspired their work.
I'm Stefan Baumann, and welcome to the Grand View. And today we have a very special treat for you. We're actually going to hike 22 miles back into the back country of Kings Canyon. This beautiful place that we discovered called Ray Lakes makes for a fascinating painting. So sit back and relax as we explore this fascinating place called Kings Canyon National Park.
In 1940, when they was building a road to go on through the Sierras, Congress made a decision to stop the road construction. And at the time, all the area we're sitting in here doing this interview is, it was a Forest Service, National Forest Service, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Interior took it over in 1940. So they had a group of different people out of the local Fresno area. They was bankers and cattlemen. They was all businessmen. And they wanted their inputs. And so there was a large group of them, along with a large group of interior people, came to the area that we're at now, which is Castle Dome Meadow. And they sat here and they sort of did a round table discussion. Each one had an opportunity to say what they wanted to see the park become.
Waste my years feeling sorry. The past is gone, the future is vague, but no one can take my memory away. And now we are here in this gift. It's a timeless present.
Well, my great-grandfather was the first ranger in Sequoia National Park. And at that point, he was the ranger. There was just one. In the 1860s, there was a pretty bad drought in the valley, and thousands of head of cattle were just starving. And the ranchers found out, probably from the Indians or miners, prospectors, whoever that had been up in here, that there were these big lush meadows even in drought years. And so they cut the trails up into these meadows and cleaned the meadows up to where they could support livestock. And that's basically how it got started. And then even now there's Forest Service permits where the ranchers can run their cattle up in the mountains in the summertime. Well, we have a pack station here where we take people with horses and mules into the back country to enjoy the wilderness. My grandfather started packing at an early age, and first went over Mineral King with out of the Mineral King area with mules in 1903.
As you enter Kings Canyon, regardless of which direction you come from, you're going to be hitting the Grant Grove first. And the part of the park that's the third oldest national park is the Grant Grove section. The Grant Grove section was set aside in 1890. It was 4 survey sections that were put aside previously by the General Land Office and that were then included in the same bill that created Yosemite. So General Grant National Park is of the same vintage as Yosemite. Sequoia National Park was created just a week before. So they were all clustered close together as the second and third oldest national parks after Yellowstone, which was created in 1872. So after General Grant National Park was created, there was a movement afoot to set aside the area around Kings Canyon and in the upper Sierra there, and also the other tributaries of the Kings River. The part of Kings Canyon that's developed is in the Cedar Grove area, and it's just a tiny bit. It's just the South Fork of the Kings River. The middle fork is all wilderness still. We are among one of the most polluted national parks in the country right now. The American Lung Association did a survey and announced that 3 of the 5 most polluted air districts are in the Central Valley, right at the base of the park. So our air comes from there, it comes from that we're in the same eddy. We're in the same flow of air. It's one of the things that makes it such a pressing problem for us is there's nothing we can do to control it. The air pollution we have in the park here is not primarily from sources within the park. It's from people all throughout the Central Valley and even upwind on the currents of air that come in from San Francisco and things. Well, I prefer all the portions of the park which are off trail, because then you really feel the wildness of the wilderness. It's easy, even backpacking on trail, to become lost in your own thoughts. There's not so much, you don't have to focus so much on finding your path or knowing where you are, because you're trusting the trail to take you where you want to go. So getting off trail, you get much more challenging terrain, and you're just constantly, thoroughly, completely focused in studying the land around you, really paying attention. Some of the alpine lakes, all of the alpine lakes are fabulous, and the ones off trail are just even more, they have an even stronger spirit about them, really, because there's so few people that visit them, and it's such a quiet spot up there.
You'll never know what you uncover as you journey through Kings Canyon. Around every corner, there's a surprise.
The caves here in the Sierra Nevada are formed in these Mesozoic aged marbles. They're rocks that were originally laid around islands that were created or added onto North America. We do list almost 210 caves here in the two national parks. Now, most of these are pretty small, but we also have the longest cave in the state here, which is Loburn Cave. It's about 18-mile long complex maze of passageways, a lot of beautiful marble banding and active streams. Boynton Cave is first of all, is in an amazingly beautiful setting. I mean, it's in the gates of the Kings River at the bottom of what, by some reports, is the deepest canyon in North America. So you're along this beautiful mountain river in the bottom of a canyon that's many, many thousands of feet deep. And the cave entrance is sort of up on this cliff in a few trees. It's a really scenic setting for a cave. Caves are definitely made by groundwater. Groundwater is naturally mildly acidic. And here in this particular area, we'll often have a stream, say, develop in a nice granitic valley. It will flow down and encounter a body of this marble bedrock, and then it will sink underground and flow through a cave and then emerge again as a spring. And that's really the most common scenario here. And that's because our rock types that form caves, marble here in the parks, are really kind of isolated small bodies of this sort of rock. Very commonly here, the caves often form on one sort of very well-defined trend or pattern, and that is that most cave passages run sort of roughly from northwest to southeast or southeast to northwest, which is also parallel to the crest of the mountain range. And we think that's because a lot of the rocks in this area actually have been compressed over time, and that's sort of tended to extend them out and cause fracturing perpendicular to that compression. And so we have small faults and fracturing in the crest of the mountain range and cave passages that are all parallel to each other.
Well, we've made it to our destination. This hike took us over 22 miles, and I've got to say, it was worth every mile of it. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Now, with a nice rounded filbert brush, what we want to do is we want to cut our canvas into thirds. So I'm going to draw a line. Everything on the side will act to frame this main area, and you'll see as I build up the composition that this becomes very important. So we're going to go ahead and start sketching on the middle ground and the foreground, and then just place the background mountains in. And we're looking down on the water. So the water will not appear straight. It will actually have a little bit of a curve to it. I absolutely love sketching this way. Working wet on wet with these sketches and pushing them around frees up the artist, and you'll see that you don't have to worry about following a line and then being stuck with it. So along with my sketch, I'm painting in the shadows. The highlight colors will be my base coat for my canvas. Right now, we're getting a wonderful shadow across our mountain. And constantly, as the composition changes, because of the light changes, I'm going to put little footnotes on my canvas. Okay, make sure you get your nice base in and your dark colors. Spend some time making sure that your sketch is absolutely correct. And now, let's go ahead and get the base of this tree in, since right now the light is so beautiful on it. And I'm going to wipe off a little bit of that highlight on that rock. It's so spectacular. Well, I'm just about done with my sketch, and the light's coming out and everything is getting perfect to start painting. Now, there's been some fires in this area, so the entire scene is affected with a little misting of smoke. So this painting will be a variation of gray tones. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare this gray to the gray of this mountain to make sure that my gray values are correct. So what I want to do is get a feeling that both these are in the same atmosphere, but that this mountain is closer than this one. And there's a lot of gray in my tone from my sketch, and I'm just mixing this color into that color. Variations of the same color. Now this peak here, same thing applies. Lay it in a mass, and then this whole shadow of the mountain falls on across the other shadow. I'm going to start painting the highlights on these mountains. Now these are not the extreme highlights. These are the colors of the mass of the rocks. And they're going to be laid in very, very flat. And then what I'm going to do is integrate some of the shadows in between some of the highlights and kind of form the shapes of the rocks before we start putting the detail in. Now this is a base. And see, with that thick paint, I just twist my brush and lay in the highlight. One thing you have to keep in mind, this whole process is a constant process of change. And I'm just very quickly warming up my highlights. And this is that gray color that I laid in. I'm going to take the dark shadow color and I'm going to lift it right off of my canvas here. And I'm going to start laying in some of the crevices and cracks that I see. And because my sketch is relatively accurate at this point, it's not that hard to go in and put this detail in. Okay, now with a lot of my detail in, I'm going to spend some time putting in some of these wonderful little glaciers. I'm going to mix a lighter color of my gray tone. I want to make sure that the glacier is drawn in absolutely perfect. And you may have to go back in and recorrect your sketch a little bit by taking your brush, just push it back, work back and forth. Okay, now I'm going to switch to a little smaller brush. I'm just going to put some of these wonderful strong highlights in. These are the peak highlights, the light that absolutely defines the mountain. Okay, now with the detail done, we're just about ready to start working on our sky. Now the sky value is going to change the entire mountain value. You want to use a lot of paint on your brush. Just twist the brush right up to the edge of the mountain. Now this color's a little bit lighter because we want the horizon to be a little lighter than the rest of the sky. The foreground mountains, or the next layer of mountains, has a row of trees growing on them, but what we want to do is capture the rocks underneath them first. So by moving the stroke of the brush around it, we create the feeling that these are just flat boulders that have been affected by glaciers coming through here. Now I'm introducing a little bit more yellow. This is the bushes and grass that sits underneath the trees. Okay, now we're ready to start putting in our trees. Just with a flick of the brush, create the illusion of trees. And now with our background trees done, we're ready to start laying in the background meadow. We're just going to lay that in with a nice big brush and just be real free with it right now. Lay in the base color. And then we're going to do that also in the foreground. There's a nice, beautiful beach in the foreground. And while we have this color, we're going to lay some of that color in the foreground also. Now in this area here, we've got that wonderful rock that I want to put in. And if you notice, I've painted green in. So what I'm going to do is switch to a palette knife. And I'm going to scrape that area off a little bit. And I'm going to take my palette knife. I'm going to lay that rock in with my palette knife. I'm just going to lay right across it, just like that. Okay, now with our rocks done, we're ready to start working on our water. I'm going to switch to a flat brush, and I'm going to mix just burnt sienna and ultramarine blue together and create a real dark, dark, dark color. And I'm going to start painting this color vertically, up and down. Go all the way across your canvas like that. Right up to the shoreline. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start indicating some of these reflections by taking some of the blue color that we used in the sky. This is the blue-gray. You want to go vertically back and forth. This is the reflection of the sky. And then what we want to do is put a reflection of our meadow. Pull down, pull down, pull down. People think that reflections are so difficult to paint, but in essence they're real easy. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the dark color, go along my meadow. Notice how that pops out just the edge of my meadow to my water. Now what we're going to do is create a little bit of this transparent water, and what we're looking at is actually the ground underneath the water. And it's got a light brown tone to it. And I'm going to take yellow and blue, mix them together for a nice green color. Now since we have all the verticals done, now we're going to start putting in the horizontals. I'm going to switch to a fan brush. Not too many of these. Not too many of these. What you want to do is create just a slight rippling across the water. And now since I have my fan brush in my hand, I've taken a little bit of burnt sienna and white, and I'm just going to lay in my beach. Burnt sienna and white. I'm going to add a little bit more highlight to it. Make sure it's definitely on the brown tone. We don't want too much yellow, because then it will mix in with our meadow color. And we're going to take a dark color and go right along the edge of our meadow. This will help separate the beach from our meadow. Okay, now since we have this done, it's time to work on our trees, and we're going to use the same brush, and we're going to get a little darker color on it, and we're going to start laying in the base for these trees. Remember, we have that wonderful dead tree to paint in the middle. Just going to lay it in. We're going to use a lighter color, and I'm recalling the light that we saw this morning. Okay, now with that done, we're ready to start one of my favorite parts, and that's the foreground trees. And what we're going to do is we're going to mix ultramarine blue and burnt sienna together. Now I've introduced a little bit of white to my burnt sienna ultramarine blue. Just start painting in some of the highlights. The highlights are on the left side of the tree. Blend a little into the wet paint underneath. This is a wet on wet technique. This method is called alla prima. While I have this fan brush, I can very quickly lay in a little bit of the meadow. And then in the front we have a little bit more foliage. This has a little bit more yellow to it, so it stands out. To a smaller brush and start putting in the little twigs. Expanded instructional DVDs that feature an hour-long demonstration of today's painting and other paintings in the series are available at the Grandview by calling 1-800-511-1337. Join us on our website, thegrandview.org, and get more information about our show. There you can download our free book, Everything You Need to Know About Outdoor Painting, along with a free diagram of today's subject. Stefan Baumann's The Grand View is funded in part by
paintingfromnature.com, a website for artists seeking inspiration, advice, and knowledge to master painting from nature. paintingfromnature.com.
and by
Masterpiece Canvas, makers of fine art canvases. We supply the canvas, you supply the vision.
and by
Plein magazine for people who love painting outdoors. pleinairmagazine.com